All right, a very warm welcome back everyone. Today we want to talk about the tracks, and one of the tracks that is already available when you start any Cubase project is this stereo out track, but I'd like to call this bus. Buses are basically group tracks that aggregate information and then route it out. In this case, the stereo out bus is the last one in the chain, so basically everything you prepare or you compose in this project will be eventually routed out to the stereo out bus, and therefore this is the last part where you can change any of your inserts, or where you can change the sound basically. If I'm opening the mixing console right now, you can see that there is even a stereo in bus here, but this is not that important. It just allows you to basically record something into your DAW, but the stereo out bus is very important because this is where essentially everything comes out of your DAW, right? Now you can see that these two faders here are red, and this is not for every fader, but only for the in and output buses. And the way I learned this is basically you do not want to touch these red faders at all and move them around. One way to circumvent this is just creating a group track before the stereo out bus, but I think we'll talk about this a little bit later. So what we want to do now is basically create our first instrument track, and I'm going to give you a rundown on all of these other tracks that we all have available. So if I'm going to the plus sign here and I'm just clicking on it, you can see that I get this add track box here. The most important 4 tracks are already laid out on top of here. So you have the audio track, the instrument track, the sampler track, and the MIDI track. Audio and sampler does work very well together, and instrument and MIDI tracks also do, and we'll see why in the course of these videos. Then you also have other tracks that you can, or groups or buses you can create, and you want to think of those in 2 groups here. So you have the group, the effect, and the VCA fader, which are some sort of group tracks, but do not necessarily only work as aggregating information and aggregating sounds, but also work with just inserting effects. Then you have the VCA fader, which is some sort of group track, but this is only available in the Cubase Pro version, I believe. And then you have some organization tracks, which is the marker, the ruler, and the folder track. And all of those can occur in multiple instances in one project. Then you have tracks that are only loaded once, or that can only be loaded once into one single project. And these are basically tracks that allow you to change some parameters that are globally available in the project, such as tempo, signature, the arranger track, which is basically the orientation of in which you want to play your song. Then you have the transpose, the call track, and the video track. But I think the most important ones for us in from these are the arranger and the chord track. So if we now think of instrument tracks first, and VST instruments in general, we want to create one of those, and the instrument we are going to choose is basically Halion Sonic SE, because this is the version that comes prepared with every Cubase version that you can buy. So in this case, this should be available for everyone, and you want to add a track now. So let's just do this, and you'll see that you have the instrument here. In order to reopen the instrument once you've closed this, you can either do so by clicking on the Edit Instrument button here, or on the button here. And what you see now is basically you have a lot of options you can choose from, which are patch-wise. So these are all basically different patches you can use. And you can, if you double click on one of those, you can just add them to your slot here and then play around with them. Right? Now you can see that there are 15 more of these insert slots, but we'll go into those a little bit deeper in just a second. What I want to do now is just record something with this patch, because just loading them and jamming around a little doesn't make any sense if you're just jamming around and cannot record this. So what I'm going to do now is hit the multiply key on my num block, sorry, and I will be able to record some of my performances then. This recording stuff also adheres to the things that are mentioned here, but we'll talk about those when we are talking about recording in loops. All right. So if I'm now hitting the space bar, I can stop my recording, and I can also start my listening back, or my playback, I should say. And if I'm now double clicking on this event here, you can see that there is basically the notes that I've played in there, and they have been recorded. So if I'm now moving back here and I'm just hitting spacebar again, so I can play this back, you should hear everything as I played it in. Now, the very important thing about this editor is that you can not only watch everything and play this back, but you can also move notes around if you want to. So if I'm just clicking on one of those notes and move those around, you can see that they are attached to the grid now. But if I don't want that, I can just hit Control on my keyboard and move this around very freely. You can also do so for multiple of those. You can also quantize this if you want to. Quantizing works with the Q button, and in this case we have quantized this in a soft manner, so basically not completely on the grid, but in this case I think 50%, yeah, 50% to the grid. You can also turn this off and then quantize hard, which then makes every beat or every note sit on one of these grid points that you have defined here, right? And now the performance would sound a little bit different. In this case, it sounds very mechanical in comparison to what I played, which sounds a little bit more human, right? So this is how you can record and create instrument tracks. And next, we are going to look at what MIDI tracks actually have to do with this.